There we go.
Yeah, we started that ambassador program a couple of years ago, and then kind of combined that with his student council, which has helped the student council grow. And given a lot of support
The
for
link.
that.
Good.
All right, let me go over here.
Yeah, see if it's.
Oh, it's already working. This is scary. No, it's not. It's fine. It's a bit delayed. There's like a 10-second delay.
I wonder if that will even out.
Well, I think it's a delay just because it's live streaming. Like no live is ever going to be like on time exactly lined up.
Very good.
That way you can bleep things in case we say something.
Yeah, we'll be ready.
In case there's like a malfunction of some sort, we can cut it out.
Any wardrobe.
The microphone seems to be connecting
Let me put
well
it
enough.
out
So,
here and like.
okay, we'll just keep chatting.
Let's keep chatting and then I'll come back.
Okay. We were using this before for a different event, and the microphone wouldn't pick up anything. So we were like holding it like under the speaker, and it worked, but it wasn't. You'd think with that size, it should be.
Yeah, but I have this exact same speaker. We use it when we were doing the deadline session. So there's 3 settings here, and one setting is really local.
Oh, maybe that was.
And then 2 of the other ones are more for general broadcasting, so it'll pick up more. But one is
More of an omnidirectional.
yeah.
Okay.
So
do you know what's what?
I can't remember. I think the one time when I had issues, I had it set on 2, thinking it's the middle setting. And that ended up being a setting that was one-dimensional.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my profession. I'm Randy. I'm sitting on one of the Humphrey Fellows.
Oh. Jesus, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
to see you again.
Thank you. I'm coming here for who is Roger?
Right here.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Williams. And
I'm Phil Hoy from the Alumni Relations.
yes,
So
nice to meet you,
we
Phil.
met,
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really bad with the face recognition.
I'm sorry. I think it was we had the new academic year picnic at his house.
Oh yes, very briefly.
Yeah.
Because I was only there for half an hour, then I had to run for my evening class.
Right.
I'm personally very interested in development work because back in China, I'm in charge of a vocational school. It's actually a charity, so I'm very interested in learning about the.
Yeah, it was like kind of spotty, like when I walked out there, but
Alumni and
It's-
development are very.
we're
Oh,
in
yeah.
a building, like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's
So
not
we'll have to have
that's
you talk
fine.
with
It's
Simon
adequate.
Corby somewhere along.
We're
those
okay.
lines. Director of Development for the College of
Okay.
Education.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
he's had
sure.
a lot of years with development, so it's fun.
Oh yes.
He's my overall supervisor, so we work together. Alumni Relations and Development work together.
Okay.
Just some leaders.
Yeah, I'm very interested in meeting Kobe.
Yeah.
Crack the windows.
Yeah.
Signing Kobe.
Yeah. He's great. He'll be happy to talk with you.
So probably only gonna
we
meet
can
up
set
at
up a
some-
meeting.
Right.
We talk to Baker, who's his staff assistant.
Sure.
And get something set up.
Will the whole group
This
of
building
Humphrey
was-
fellows go to meet Mr. Kobe
This building
and
was built, I think, in
I think they're Humphrey office.
That sounds right.
Thinking about that.
That's, I think that's what the core is.
Well, yes, if
Yeah.
they're doing that, then that'd be great.
Yes.
Practice.
You meet with him, speak or something.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yes, because in
And so was
Yinmon's
was
we met many
program
people
in
from the
Rapid
development office.
when you were
So I think that
No.
generally the
It
Humphrey
started
fellows
in
are
Whitmore
very interested in that
Lab.
development activity.
Okay.
That's a
It's
chemistry
very
lab.
well developed here in the United States, but it's not that well established in our
Then
own
it was
country.
moved to
So it's good to learn about all
Okay.
those things.
Yeah, then I'll be happy to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
old
I'll talk to Leila.
Yeah.
I'll talk to
Yeah.
Leila
Yeah.
and see whether she can organize the whole group
And then it went
to go to the
downtown
office.
to the
Right.
towers,
Okay.
okay, towers,
that sounds good. I mean,
which is.
we've done some things like that. We have a
Yeah.
partnership
And it
with
was there for a number of
NTA
years, and then it came back.
Draft school,
Which is where
our
it should be.
university.
Yeah.
And when they came in,
But
over
it's
the
been,
summer, we took them down to the
Yeah.
Alumni Association. Alumni, but they also-
And I don't know where it was before that,
So they were interested.
because the program started.
Oh, yeah.
You know, how to get alumni engaged.
Right.
And how to.
Right. Because the center
get
goes
them
back
engaged
about
as
that.
either
The
volunteers
center goes back.
Being interested in
That came
university,
along a little
but
bit later. That
Okay.
came about 19,
Yes.
contributions.
either late sixties or around
So, yeah.
1970s.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
G.
But that's
Lester
on that,
Anderson
so
was
we
the
can
first
just
center director.
Get that in gear.
I think the second one was
No,
Stan.
great. I think I'm learning learning so much from your practice
As I
here
recall.
in the United States,
Mhm.
in terms of university and the education institutions. So we can compare countries. We can contribute
Yeah.
our own idea
Right.
back in our own country.
It's been around
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. Talk to Lila and.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get
yeah.
something.
I'll
66 years
We got
of
time.
program, I guess.
I have to make sure it's scheduled.
Yeah.
Because our schedule is really tight.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Really tight.
Jane and Layla keep you guys going.
And Sarah, you know Sarah?
And Sarah, yeah.
Country example.
Oh, I'm right, you had to.
I'm
These are
ready.
fun.
Sam's ready.
And
I'm ready.
I think we have.
yeah, but
I
he
think-
was in the higher
Yeah, I
ed
think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe more
What's the
online.
module you're teaching?
It said we.
Thing.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
what
that's
kind of
good.
class? The economics,
Just drop
the
six.
budgeting?
Well, that's not budgeting. Budgeting is too practical.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to see everybody today. My name is Phil Hoy. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations for the College of Education, and I'm here to introduce Roger Williams. Roger is an alum of the College of Education, and tonight we're holding our alumni awards program. And so he's receiving an award tonight. But with that, we've asked him if he could come and speak with students here with higher education, because that's what his degree is from college. And but I want to give just a little bit of background information on Roger. So Roger was he served as executive director of the Penn State Alumni Association from 2003 until June of last year. So it's been a little bit over a year. He's been retired, which was great. He received 3 degrees here from Penn State. His doctorate is in higher education. He served as vice president of communications at Georgetown University and was the associate vice chancellor at the University of Arkansas prior to coming back to Penn State and assuming his executive post at the Alumni Association. As an affiliated associate professor in higher education at Penn State, Roger has authored 30 published articles and chapters in one book, The Origin of Federal Support for Higher Education, George W. Atherton and the Land Grant College Movement. His most recent article is Saving the Land Grant for the Agricultural College of Pennsylvania, which was published in the 2013 special edition of Perspectives of History of Higher Education. So please welcome Roger Williams.
Hello. Thank you. It's great to be with you today. Oh, please, come in, come in. Grab some food, grab a seat. Great to be with you. I'd like to make today's session as conversational as humanly possible, but I do have just a brief outline, so I have something to go by in case there's an awkward silence sometime during the afternoon session. First, I'd just like to briefly go around the room and have you tell me who you are, where you came from, why you came here, and where you're going. Let's start with you.
So where I came from before that here.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Rafael Prado. I'm a 3rd year in the JD PhD combined program.
Wow, okay.
I came here because there were researchers doing faculty that were kind of in the realm that I was interested in exploring. And what else?
What are you going to do after you're done with the JD PhD?
I'm really interested in doing policy research. And so whether that means in academia or working with some sort of nonprofit or government agency is something figuring that out.
Excellent. All right.
I'm Lauren Hahn. I'm a 2008 graduate of the MED program in higher ed. I am currently the director of graduate student services in Kern Building next door. So I like to occasionally come over and join my higher ed fellows and interesting topics, and I'm very interested in hearing about it.
Doing what you're doing is what I call intellectual poaching. It's one reason I always wanted to work at a university because so many things you can avail yourself of.
Plug in here and there wherever my time can allow.
Hi, my name is Ellen Freeman. I'm an MED student in higher ed. I have 1 more semester to go.
Congratulations.
My goal is to become an academic advisor at Penn State.
Very good. Very good.
Dave Guthrie. I'm a faculty member here in the higher ed program and came from the private higher education world a few years ago to come back to my alma mater as a doctoral student. And I think where I'm going is probably retirement at some point, nearer in my future than it used to be.
I remember Dave when he was a student here. Ready?
My name is Xinping. That's my Chinese name, but everybody call me Rennie anyway because it's easier to remember. And I'm a 2016 to 2017 Humphrey Fellow here in the College of Education. And back in China, I was running a charity vocational high school. Because, we encounter a lot of fundraising, networking things like here, very similar to the development office in the United States. So I'm personally very interested in how development activities is operated here and see whether I can learn from Roger. And well, my goal is to, enhance the mutual communication between China and the United States and see whether we can have further cooperations in the education field.
Very good. Where in China were you based before you came here?
Well, I was working in a little island in South China Sea. It's called Hainan. I don't know if anybody has heard about it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's really the southernmost province in China.
Yeah.
But what I said is a small island, but it's not that small. Slightly smaller than Taiwan. What I did there is helping the kids from the underprivileged household, especially the ethnic minorities, helping them to get the vocational education training because their families just couldn't afford the secondary education.
It's noble work. Very good. Nantali?
My name is Nantali Morrow. I am a second-year PhD student in the higher ed program. I am, I guess, from Atlanta, but I was in Kansas City before this. And then my goal is more the administrative route. So I'm more interested in kind of pursuing long-term, like vice provost of student affairs type of role. Who knows what that looks like in between now and then, but that's kind of where I'm looking at.
Very good. Thank you. John?
Hi, my name is Liang. Originally, I was from China, and this is my 8th year at Penn State. Before I came to Penn State, I was in Minnesota for 2 years as assistant professor. And then I went to Vanderbilt for another 2 years. Then my wife got a job here, that's I'm here. So it's a very complicated story.
What is your research interest here?
And my background actually is economics. So I teach and do research in the area of economics education and public policy finance. So, and I would like to, because a lot of my students, they want to be either kind of faculty members or researchers in not-for-profit organizations. And some of them, they do have interest to become administrators. So at that point, I feel like I come here to hear your advice on what can we provide to students, to those students who are interested in doing administration.
Very good. Sam?
Yeah. My name's Sam. I'm a second-year student in the higher ed PhD program. I'm from the West Coast. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and went to school and worked previously in Washington State, University of Puget Sound, a small liberal arts college there. My background prior to coming here was working in undergraduate admission, which sort of fueled a lot of my research interests and sort of questions I have in higher education, particularly with sort of cost structures in higher education and effects of different types of aid on student or institutional behavior. I came here because of sort of overlap in interests with faculty and people I thought I could work with. And I'm interested in faculty work afterward, but recognize I'm pretty early on things. And so what that looks like might evolve. But in my experience in admission, I worked a lot with alumni volunteers and worked with the alumni interview program. So it's not sort of central and sort of things I'm looking at and think about right now, but it's fun for me to sort of hear about and think about others' experience working in alumni relations, because I have something I can sort of tap into to think about that. So.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. One of the things I've always loved about the higher ed program is the diversity of backgrounds, of interests. It's amazing the kind of students it attracts from all over the world. Great program for that. Well, I thought I'd just give you a sense of my experience in higher education quickly. And please jump in with any questions at any time. This should be as conversational as possible. I started working in higher education in 1978 when I was 28 years old. And I started here at Penn State. as a writer-editor in the Department of Public Information. I had been working as a reporter, a newspaper reporter before that. And basically, I worked my way up over the years into the position of Executive Director of University Relations, which is Public Relations and Communications at Penn State. And it was a very heady time in the 1980s at Penn State because we had a great president, a man I just grew to love, a guy named Bryce Jordan, who was here from 1983 to 1990. And Dr. Jordan had an overarching goal for Penn State. He wanted to make sure that by the time he left, this university was ranked as one of the top 10 public research universities in America. And he got us pretty close to that. He did amazing things here, and I was able to work a little bit with him as Executive Director of University Relations. I did some speech writing for him, and it was just a glorious, upbeat time. Early on, I thought to myself, I need to know more about higher education. So I applied for admittance to this program and started in the spring of 1982. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to, there were a couple reasons why I wanted to have a doctorate in higher education. One was, if you're in communications and public relations, the research shows that communicators, organizational communicators, public relations people, get very high marks, for working with the media. But they get low marks. They tended to get low marks in terms of what they knew about the industry or the organization they were representing. And I thought to myself, the last thing I want to do is to be an ignoramus over the next 30 years. So I wanted to have a grounding in higher education. If this was the industry I was going to work in, I wanted to be as knowledgeable as possible. And of course, the other thing was to get the degree. If you're going to make a career in higher education, I did not want to go through life as Mr. Roger Williams. So it helps to establish some credibility. It's a good degree to have. But those are my reasons for getting into the program. I graduated in 1988. I went part-time most of the time and had a great experience with superb faculty at the time. It was a wonderful academical village for me. I just loved the students, loved the faculty, and had a great experience. So working in university relations and getting my degree, I was fortunate to have a great dissertation topic on George W. Atherton, a former Penn State president who was here for 24 years from 1882 to 1906, who really stabilized this institution and got it launched on the road to success for the 20th century. And my dissertation was on him, and I was able to get it published. The dissertation was named the 1989 Dissertation of the Year by Ash. So that helped, and this is a book that I got out of it, published by Penn State Press in 1991. So it's The Origins of Federal Support for Higher Education, as Phil, I think, said. So I remained working at Penn State in university relations. Again, a great time into the early 1990s, and working with the program as well. And working especially with Dr. Roger Geiger, who was my dissertation advisor. Bob Hendrickson was my chair, but Roger Geiger was my dissertation advisor. And I was his first graduate student, actually. He had come here from Yale, I think in 86, 87 academic year, just at the beginning of it. So we hooked up at the right time. And he's been a colleague, friend, and advisor ever since. And I am one of the privileges of my life, or one of the great strokes of good fortune, was to come into contact with Roger Geiger and to work with him. I worked with him on his History of Higher Education Annual, which is now Perspectives on the History of Higher Education, and published a few articles along the way. And then I was able to leave Penn State in 1995. There was a changing of the guard in terms of the presidency. And I went to Georgetown for a while. I worked in private practice for a while as a consultant, which was an incredible education, working with about maybe 30 to 35 institutions, ranging from Butler University in Indiana to Winston-Salem State University to SUNY Buffalo. It was an amazing experience, able to just reach in and get a very quick but deep knowledge of a variety of institutions. Worked at the University of Arkansas. I was there for 5 years as head of the University Relations Program. And it was an exciting time to be there too, because they had a chancellor who had come in from, he had been Dean of Engineering at Georgia Tech, and he was an alumnus, and he was determined to make the University of Arkansas a big-time research university. And excuse me, that's been pretty much accomplished. So that was a great time to be there. I came back to Penn State in 2003 to head the Alumni Association, a competitive search. I stayed close to the program, didn't do any teaching in the program because of the nature of the job, but there were two things we did in the first decade of the new millennium. The Alumni Association worked with the program and the center to put together for Penn State's sesquicentennial celebration. It's 150th anniversary back in 2005. We put together a major symposium, a national symposium on the future of the American Public Research University. Very well attended, people from all over the country. This was in February of 2005, and just a marvelous conference. There were no tracks. Everything was a plenary session, so everybody was in the same large auditorium listening to the same presentations. A number of higher education faculty presented at the time. And what came out of that was this compendium. This is the future of the American Public Research University. This was published by a collection of papers that were presented and published by Sense Publishers out of Rotterdam back in 2007. So it's a major event for Penn State. Again, the Alumni Association was a co-sponsor of that, and the editors of the book are Carol Kolbach, who was the director of the center, Christian Anderson, whom some of you may know, who's a professor, I believe,
South Carolina.
at South Carolina, yeah, in Columbia, yeah, Roger Geiger, and myself. So that's that. We also worked with the higher education program and the center and the College of Education in 2011 to sponsor a major national symposium on the Morrill Act. It was, we were coming up on its 150th anniversary, the Morrill Land Grant College Act. It was passed and signed into law in 1862, and in 2012 was its 150th anniversary. So we decided to go a year early to do a major conference, a major national conference, so that we'd have something to publish in conjunction with the actual celebration. And out of that came this special issue of Perspectives on the History of Higher Education. This is land-grant colleges and the reshaping of American higher education. So a number of papers were incorporated into this. And this was the second major conference that we did with the Alumni Association in partnership with the College of Education and this higher education program and the center, and a couple of other offices too. So those conferences were a lot of fun. We really enjoyed that. At the Alumni Association, I should probably tell you one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that the Penn State Alumni Association got better and better over the years, and really distanced ourselves in terms of being the largest dues-paying alumni association in the world, which we are. When we started back in 2003, there were 146,000 dues-paying members. Last year, there were 177,000. So we worked very hard to grow the organization. We worked very hard to support the academic mainstream of the university. One of the things with alumni associations, as you may discern, is that in the United States, at least, there's always a relationship with the athletic department. And that can be for good or for ill. But one thing you don't want an alumni association to do is to be perceived as a booster club for athletics. You support it. I mean, you're part of that, but you got to do more. You got to support the university proper, the academic mainstream. And so we did a lot to establish scholarships in every college, on every campus, to do programs of the sorts that I just described, and other programs as well, with academic units of the university. And it's extremely important to make sure that you're if you're an alumni association, you are doing everything you can to help strengthen your parent university. Okay, so there's more. We can get into that. We'll get into questions and answers. But what I would do now is to tell you that I've been retired for 15 months now. It's a weird experience. I still haven't gotten used to it. There's a lot that I missed, but I've been working on a book over the last 15 months. It's a book on Penn State's founding president, a person named Evan Pugh, who was a genius and a visionary. I call him a visionary with a driving sense of purpose, who really took this place back in 1859 and got it going successfully as probably the model American agricultural college. This is even before the Morrill Act of 1862. And what he did for this place was to establish a very high academic standard. Evan Pugh was a Welsh Quaker, 6th generation in America from Chester County, Pennsylvania. Largely self-educated, or educated with at the foot of his aunt, went to a seminary, opened his own academy in Chester County, and went to Germany in 1854 to study chemistry and the sciences. And as many of you higher education students are probably aware, in the 19th century, certainly before the Civil War, there was no real graduate study at all in this country. And so if you wanted advanced knowledge, you had to cross the pond. And Germany, far and away, was the center of the sciences. France and England as well, but Germany was really where the modern research university developed, and especially in terms of scientific agriculture. That's where a lot of the chemistry came out of. Even in the 1850s, there were agricultural experiment stations being established in the various German states. So Evan Pugh was over there. He started at Leipzig, got his PhD at Göttingen, and studied in Heidelberg for a bit. I went to France for a year, did not like France for a lot of reasons, and then went to England and did an incredible experiment at arguably the world's leading agricultural experiment station. This was a place called Rothamsted, north of London. And Pugh was engaged with the founders of that research station, doing an experiment. It lasted about 20 months on how plants, especially grasses, how they assimilate nitrogen. Do they assimilate nitrogen from the air, which was one theory, or from the soil? What do you think the answer is?
Soil.
Got it. Got it. So basically that experiment, one scholar said, if he had done it today, it's an experiment that probably would have qualified for the Nobel Prize, because it basically established the modern ammonium nitrate fertilizer industry and had a profound effect on agriculture in this country and worldwide. So this genius then came back because he always wanted to, he was fitting himself to basically put together a model American agricultural college. And he was very interested. He kept his connections up. But he was a student. He was gone for 6 years. He came back here in 1859, and this place was the Farmers High School. Despite the name, it was an actual college. And I won't bore you with the details, but he really got this place up and running. Did incredible things, high academic standard. He graduated the first students in America with a Bachelor of Scientific Agriculture degree in 1861. So, I look at the challenges that he faced, and it's amazing. When he came here, there was basically one building where Old Main is today. It was the original Old Main, but it was 1/3 finished. And even that 1/3, that west wing, was only 3 out of 5 stories completed. So, among other things, he had to get the building completed because you couldn't have a college without a college building. You had to have something to accommodate students, faculty, museums, lecture halls. Everything was done in one single building. He did that. He fought for the Morrill Act, supported that in 1862, and then he was able to work with the legislature and his trustees to ensure that The land grant designation went to the Agricultural College of Pennsylvania, which it did in April of 1863. But after that, things began to unravel. Politically, a lot of other colleges in Pennsylvania started bucking for the land grant designation and the bounty that would accrue. As you may know, the Moral Land Grant Act basically appropriated federal land based on population of states. And the idea was you take this land and you sell it. And the proceeds are used to establish an endowment that then supports the school into perpetuity. Okay? So that is what happened. He got the designation for us, but it was contested over the next year. There was a battle royale, basically in the spring of 1864 in the legislature. They wanted to do various things with the land grant fund. They wanted to use it to establish, funds for common schools, elementary schools, funds for wounded soldiers' homes, a variety of things. And various colleges wanted a piece of this. Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. The Western University of Pennsylvania, which is Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. The University at Lewisburg, which is Bucknell. Pennsylvania College, which is the present-day Gettysburg College. And an institution in Philadelphia called the Polytechnic Institute of the state of Pennsylvania. It's no longer around. They were all vying for a piece of the land grant fund. So Pew and the trustees and his allies in the Pennsylvania agricultural community had to put together quite a defense. They defeated a couple of bills in the spring of 1864 that would have foreclosed Penn State's exclusive designation. The tragedy of this is that Pew died just as this legislative battle was climaxing. He contracted typhoid fever, and back in the 19th century, you did not want to get typhoid fever. It basically comes from unsanitary drinking water, sanitary conditions. When it hits you fast. He was dead within a week, and he died April 29th, 1864. This institution carried on. There were further legislative battles, but by February of 1867, 3 years later almost, finally there was a bill that conceded that the entire land grant needed to come to this institution. So nothing's easy. Nothing's ever been easy for Penn State, but it's an amazing story, and it's just it's fascinating. There's a lot more to it than I've been able to tell, but I think it's a story that deserves a larger airing, because I really believe he was an incredibly brilliant man, hardworking, a visionary with a driving sense of purpose. So, okay, so that's my story. I'm going to stick to it. But any questions that you may have on anything and everything? Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Roger. Sorry I'm late.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. By the way, this retirement thing, I'm not into it myself, but I don't think Mark was retired 6 months when he had 2 consulting businesses going.
Yeah.
And the nets were coming from all the local nonprofits to do stuff. He's working as harder than he did.
Yeah.
He's being paid for it.
Well, you have to do something. I mean, you have to.
Hey, as long as he's out from under my feet.
There you go.
Now, anyway, there are many options, and I am looking forward to seeing the book, because he really is interesting. I mean, that he could be that successful at having something started that's only like 5-10 years old when they're fighting over the money. I mean, it could have all gone down the drain at that point.
A lot of things could have happened. And the other thing you have to appreciate is he's building this college up in the midst of the Civil War. Not easy to do. And other agricultural colleges that had been chartered and were started, they just kind of fell apart. They couldn't be going. Some died entirely. The New York State Agricultural College at Ovid, O-V-I-D, New York. It opened in December of 1860, but it was dead a year later. The war claimed money, and the war claimed men. So he was able to keep this place going and increase enrollments, build it up, get appropriations for the building from the legislature. Just did some amazing things. So the pedigree to this institution is that it was what Pew wanted it to be, become, which was the model agricultural college in America. He wanted to set something up that others could emulate across the country. He wanted the model. And he was the only scientist as a head of these kinds of institutions, so he knew what he was doing. In fact, his mantra was, if you have a scientific college, which this was when it started, you have to have a scientist heading it. Other folks won't get it. And he was adamant about that fact, that you had to have a scientist running a scientific institution.
Yes, it's actually kind of interesting because it's like he took the entire change of education, all education, in the middle of the century, and pulled it out and put it up front. I mean, he had a very clear vision, and I think that's what makes him different from all the educators who were doing more of the same and maybe adding new courses. But he was putting the new.
He was putting the.
It's sort of like sort of like us putting electronic and information stuff out front finally because things had changed again.
Yeah.
But that's visionary. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it in terms of that.
Yeah, there's much more to talk about. But, hopefully, I'm just about at the end of my revisions, and I want to get this turned in by November 1st, and we'll see what happens after that. Dave.
This change in directions, your career spans a pre-social media world to a very social media world. Yeah. And in your particular role, that fundamentally had to do with communication and information, how did that feel for you? I mean, what was your experience of that significant change? Or maybe you don't see it that way, but I was sort of curious about your response to that.
No, it's a tremendous sea change because what information technology has done, what social media has done, is to open everything up. Privacy as a concept is gone, as you well know. Everybody's communicating about everything. Everybody has an opinion on everything. And it's a little more difficult for organizations to work in that kind of environment, I think. One of my first introductions to it was I was at the University of Arkansas. This was the first day of classes in the year 2000, beginning of the 2000-2001 academic year. So I'm hearing sirens go off, okay? So the phone rings. I pick it up.
You mean that phone that you picked up?
Yeah, desk phone. Although I had a cell phone at the time, but it was a big cell phone. Like a 6-gun, just bigger. They've shrunk, thank God, since then. But it was the head of the Associated Press Bureau in Little Rock calling and saying, "What's the shooting? What's going on?" Well, actually, what had happened, I was eating my lunch, and this is going on. So I say, well, I was stunned. I was caught by surprise. Long story short, I said, well, we'll get back to you. But the media were beginning to converge on the campus. And what had happened was a disgruntled graduate student in comparative literature in his mid-30s had gone into a faculty office, his faculty advisor's office, shot him dead, and then closed the door and shot himself. And so this is the first day of classes. You can imagine what kind of trauma this is. But the lesson for me, the epiphany for me as a communicator was, students had cell phones by that time. They were calling their parents. This isn't contained. The thing that kind of comes out in episodes. Things happen instantaneously. And so it's a little bit harder as an institutional communicator to control the flow of information. And all we could do, and what we did, was to have a series of news conferences. That was our strategy. You have to lay it out. You have to tell people what you know when you know it. So we had 3 news conferences that first day, and we had 2 the next day, and then 1 every day, just to bring everybody up to speed on the investigation, the autopsy, all that stuff. I remember we hung on the web the police drawing of the bodies as they were lying on the floor and where the bullets had penetrated. So people were shocked by that. But the lesson is you have to be open. You know, you can't sit on anything. You can't hide anything. So it is a different world. It's a very different world. And, you know, I think organizations have done a fairly good job in terms of every organization is using social media to its advantage. Everybody's using Facebook. The Alumni Association has a Facebook page, a Twitter feed, everything. I mean, you have to do it. That's the way the world is. So it's changed dramatically. And when I started in 1978, I was starting on a Remington manual typewriter, World War II Army surplus, you know, with copy paper and carbon paper, copy paper. Oh my word! But
actually, I have a comment. We all talk about how we know stuff so fast because of our electronics, and it's true. If something happens, I could get a Penn State alert, which I ignore.
Yeah.
Or I could get a message from a friend who lives in South Africa, which I would not ignore.
Yeah.
But I remember being at a small Pennsylvania college a few millennia ago. 900 students, the size of a nice-sized, actually a fairly large-sized village, a small town. And I came to realize within a few weeks that if I sneezed at 9 o'clock at night in the women's dorm in which we were locked up at those days, the old-fashioned kind of telephones that were on the wall and you didn't have one in your dorm anyway, by 9:05, everybody on campus knew that I had a cold.
Amazing.
Or that anybody had a cold. And you don't know how the information goes from here to there. So when we talk about this, yeah, it gets there maybe a little faster because of the electronics, and it gets there with pictures because everybody likes modern, you know, interface. But we haven't changed at all as people. And we may get more information, and we may get it in microseconds faster. But in fact, if you lived in a small community, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody else's business. I don't think there's a child in the world who didn't come home one day and his mother or father said, usually his mother, I understand you did such and such today. A little birdie told me. Well, the little birdie may be the telephone, or it may be somebody at the market, or it may be somebody put your picture on Facebook and you're really in deep, deep trouble. But I don't think as people we've changed at all. We just use this new stuff bigger and faster.
My old Latin teacher used to say in high school, human nature doesn't change. Conditions, the circumstances, the technology can change, but human nature stays pretty much the same. It's pretty much a constant. So you're quite right. Well, other questions, comments? Sam?
Question, sort of, again, a different direction. I'm curious, sort of, your perspective, sort of, as state support changes or declines for institutions, how that affects the role of an alumni office. And I think for some institutions, and I don't have the sort of the numbers to make the claim, but I would imagine that Penn State's in a position where alumni donations and gifts are a sizable contribution on an annual basis, and that carries weight in the operating budget. For other places, that's not the case, but at a place like Penn State, where you do have such a significant number of dues-paying members, how does sort of a shift on one end of the revenue stream affect kind of the work or the nature of the work for alumni and development offices?
Well, one thing that happened in the Penn State Alumni Association and in other alumni associations is that we founded a legislative advocacy operation in 2002, the year before I got there, and it grew over the years. It's called the Penn State Grassroots Network. And we have a full-time director who reports to the Chief Executive Officer of the Alumni Association and works with volunteers. And it's all e-communications, obviously, but he basically keeps the members of the grassroots network, which is about, it fluctuates between 35 and 40,000 up to date. And then when we work very closely, of course, with the Office of Governmental Affairs at Penn State. This is not a rogue operation. You don't want to do anything stupid. So we always work hand in glove with the Office of Governmental Affairs. And there are times when our appropriation was under threat where we issued calls to action, contact your legislator. Here's some talking points you might use, but tell your own story. And it did have an effect. We mobilized the grassroots network for funding for public broadcasting some years ago on the federal level and on the state level. We had a pretty terrible crisis here back in the 2010-11 academic year when we had a new governor come into office, Tom Corbett, and in his initial budget message proposed a 50% reduction in Penn State's appropriation for the subsequent year. That's a lot of money, and our appropriation at the time was over $300 million. It's almost back to that same level now. But we mobilized, working with governmental affairs, we mobilized the network. The administration did a lot of work. Long story short, the cut turned out to be about 19.8%, so it was much less than what the governor proposed. And the following year, he proposed another reduction, but we have friends in the legislature, and they held the line. But those are the kinds of things that we have done to protect the state appropriation, which is, roughly $300 million plus change. I think they want to get it up to 350 this year. It doesn't sound like a whole lot in the context of the overall operating budget of the university, which is what this year? It's 5.1 billion, I think, in that neighborhood. But it's the money that pays the bills, turns on the lights, pays faculty. Excuse me. I'm getting talked out here. There we go. So that's one thing that we have done.
Yeah. Would it also, sort of in addition to sort of mobilizing alumni and the grassroots work, would it put increased pressure on donations, ability to?
Sure.
Or is that the sort of separate pieces?
Well, it's pretty separate. About 98% of the private gift support that comes into Penn State is restricted. That is to say, it's designated for a particular purpose. Scholarships, endowed faculty chairs, academic program support, that sort of thing. So it's not general operating dollars, but it really makes a huge difference in the quality of the university. Penn State got into major fundraising back in the 1980s. Bryce Jordan started the campaign for Penn State. Original goal of $200 million, sounds like chump change now. But we finished at about $352 million. Graham Spanier came in the mid-1990s and launched the Grand Destiny campaign, and that raised over $1 billion. And the third campaign concluded a year and a half ago, For the Future, the campaign for Penn State students. With an initial goal of, I think, 1.5, it was raised to $2 billion, and we finished at about 2.2. And I'm getting to your point. That campaign attracted the largest number of alumni donors of any campaign in the United States at the time. So alumni really did step up in great numbers. Penn State gets a lot of broad support from its alumni base. And I think the theme of the campaign, supporting students, helping to keep the cost of higher education somewhat contained, had a pretty strong appeal. So yeah, alumni are a huge part of it, But again, it's money that is used for restricted purposes, not unrestricted operating purposes.
Thank you.
Sure.
It doesn't hurt that you managed to develop one of the largest, if not the largest, living alumni organizations in the country.
It is. It's the largest dues-paying alumni association in the country. We went from about 146,000 to 177,000. And it's important to do that for a lot of reasons. One of the motivating factors for us was that is something that helps the university. It is a huge talking point for Penn State in the recruitment of students, recruitment of student athletes, the recruitment of faculty, the recruitment of staff. I hear it used all the time. It's a point of pride for Penn State, and so it's used in that respect to garnish the university's reputation and to give folks who might want to come here an even better reason for wanting to come here. Dave?
I will yield my time to another question if somebody has one. But I did want to know about the nature of the damage control in alumni relations with the Sandusky scandal.
Yeah.
Like what, I assume that there was some damage control to be done there with alumni in particular, because if only because my perception is this maybe I don't have the right perception, is that some alumni felt this way, some alumni felt that way, some alumni felt that, you know what I mean? Was that the way that it was, and how did that look for your office to navigate that?
Phone calls.
When you're talking about the last 4 years of my professional life, which was very different. You know, from 2003 to November 3rd, 2011, I had the best job in the world. I was in a world of happiness, love, camaraderie, positivity. Okay, I mean, when
Nirvana even.
Yeah, Nirvana. Best job in the world. I mean, you have to do a lot of real work, but it was, the environment was so upbeat, so wonderful. I used to introduce Graham Spanier when we would take him out on the road as the person who has the second best job at Penn State. I had the best job at Penn State. We had to deal with some of the stuff Graham had to deal with. But on November 4th, it was like the switch was just flipped overnight. And the huge institutional trauma when Sandusky was charged and then 2 administrators were charged. Gary Schultz, our senior vice president, whom I know very well for business and finance, and Tim Curley, our athletic director. So this was 5 years ago, coming up on 5 years. So alumni were, the media converged on this university, literally College Avenue lined with satellite trucks, NBC, ABC, Reuters, you name it. It was an incredible and very confused time. For the Alumni Association, we were getting emails, phone calls, letters, and I mean thousands. We dealt with them, and we had a policy of attending to every incoming email, letter. One of the frustrations was people were writing the office of the president or the board of trustees, and there was no response. And I'm not pointing fingers here, I'm just saying that they were consumed with other matters related to the heart of the crisis. So we worked with alumni, and so many of them were obviously traumatized, shocked, angered, and very angry. And I recall thinking, what's going on here? Why is this anger so profound? And I talked to my son, who's a clinical psychologist, and he said, well, they're grieving. They're grieving for the university they loved, still love, and thought they knew. And if you look at, what is her name, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the great Swiss psychoanalyst, she wrote a book on death and dying, on grief and grieving, I think was her last book. And she talked about the 5 stages. So there's shock, there's anger, there's bargaining, and I'm trying to recall all of them, and eventually some state of acceptance. But our folks were locked into the shock and the anger. Denial is part of it too.
But your office did get a lot of. It was like a focal point. Okay.
We analyzed all of them. Our office and the development office. We analyzed all of the letters to see where people were falling out, and we were responding. We were saying, we hear you. We understand your grief. We're going to forward your concerns on to the board of trustees or to the administration, which we did. And, a lot of people were grateful just to have somebody acknowledge the fact that they were upset, and finally somebody was addressing their concerns, or at least communicating with them. So that's a lot of what we did. We did a lot of other things too. But it was a tough time, the last 4 years. I think most of our alumni,
Roger
we
is
did a,
being very,
sorry?
Roger's being self-effacing here. Roger was part of the committees that worked throughout the region to try and figure out what had happened, how to stem the problems in terms of media explosion, how to talk with not just his own alumni, but everybody in our community and outside our community. And there were a number of groups of people, including the university, State College, the county government, I forget who else was in it, the CBICC, the business community, everybody sitting down together and trying to deal. And Roger was one of the main voices amongst the entire community that tried to figure out how to deal. So he's being a little self-effacing here, saying, well, we sat in our offices there and we answered a lot of emails. They did indeed. That was the practical result within the Alumni Association. But the more important in many ways result is that the Alumni Association stood up with the community and said, what does this mean and how do we deal with it? And we're still dealing with some of it, but without Roger's leadership and his team, it might not have been dealt with quite as well for the.
Well, we did a lot on the communications front. I mean, in January of 2012, this is 2 months later, we took President Erickson out on the road to alumni gatherings in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York City, and Washington, D.C. And they weren't pretty, I'll tell you. A lot of very angry alumni. We used our communications, our e-communications, our monthly e-newsletter, our Penn State magazine, which is the most credible communications medium this university has. Although we basically go our own way with this and do what we support the university, but we also have to be open and honest. That's another result, if you will, of the communication revolution, courtesy of information technology. You can't hide anything. You can't sit on anything. You know, you've got to be open and honest. And if that happens, I think that helps to a fair degree. Now, as I said, we did a number of surveys. We've done, since 2011, probably 6 random sample, scientifically solid opinion surveys of all alumni. And they're still pretty much in Penn State's corner. They not terribly happy with the Board of Trustees or the administration, although those numbers are improving. We post this. You can go to the Alumni Association's website, www.alumni.psu.edu, and you can read through these. In fact, we have the results juxtaposed so you can see how the trend lines are. And one of the most important questions for us was credibility. You know, whom do you trust? So we asked that about the Board of Trustees, we asked that about the administration, we asked that about the Alumni Association, we asked that about Penn State students, and we asked it about faculty and staff more recently. And the Alumni Association stands about probably the highest through all of this. Students were high, they dipped a little bit in recent surveys, and faculty and staff are pretty high too, as a source of information, a credible source of information. So that was exceedingly important to us because if our numbers were tanking or were low, we knew we had a problem. So we basically stayed the course, open and honest communications, and I think you know, we grew over the same time, so I think we were on the right path. But it wasn't easy, I'll tell you, it wasn't easy.
If you were an employee here during that time, you were a spokesperson, so you first said whether you wanted to be or not.
Yeah, a lot of people were asked what's going on. I remember one time, it was the low point. It was about December, I want to say it was the week before the holiday break in December. And we had a staff meeting in the Grand Hall, Lob Hall of the Penn Family Alumni Center. Had all the staff come in just to talk about what's going on. Because our staff had gotten beat up. I mean, we had people cursing on the phone, calling them all kinds of names. And I remember sitting there, and this is December, so it's the winter solstice, okay? So it's dark early. The room was dark. Heads are hanging like this. That was the low point, because our staff had taken it on the chin. They were very professional, they were very good, From that point, things tended to get better. But to your point, Laurie, you have to be concerned about your own staff in a crisis such as this too, because they're dealing with it. I mean, from frontline receptionists to who's ever handy. And so we worked with our staff to make sure they had talking points in the event that they were called and asked to respond in some way, shape, or form. But that's another thing you have to be concerned about is your own staff. Absolutely.
I ran a registration office for continuing education in World Campus at the time, and we had one of the few 800 numbers of the university. And I mean, the same people would call over and over and over, just irate. And
some of them still are.
And well, and from simple things like just give me information to I bought a T-shirt the last time I was there, and I want a refund. And I mean, just absurd, but our phone lines got hammered.
I'm dealing with a colleague at Baylor University, which has gone through a tremendous trauma that some of you may be aware of, to the point where their alumni association was excommunicated. The alumni center was taken away from them. You're done. And they have formed a new organization called the Baylor Line. So they're working as a truly independent alumni association. We were never a truly independent alumni association. I had a dual reporting relationship to a volunteer board of directors and a president, and then to a senior vice president for development and alumni relations at the university. But they've kind of started over, and they're trying to be the independent voice of alumni. So
I remember correctly, Baylor's alumni, and a number of the other Texas ones, and 2 or 3 others around the country, they have very, very different relationship with their universities. One of the problems Penn State has tried to be careful about, despite all the screams about our athletic craziness, is that our alumni are not a great big booster club. Well, in some ways they are, but in many ways they are not just a great big booster club to pay athletes under the table. The slush funds and things don't exist. And if I remember correctly, one of the problems for Baylor, among other Texas ones, and they, as I say, and a few others, is that they actually were in large part and had been part of some of the major problems and scandals of the last 5 to 10 years. So it's interesting to find out that they just sort of cut them off completely.
Excommunicated. The same thing happened at the University of Connecticut. The president said, "You're done. You're out of business. Shut down the Alumni Association." So one of the fine lines you have to walk is when you're in a crisis. You want to continue to support your university. You don't want to let that go, because there have been examples of trauma at Michigan, at Wisconsin, at any number of universities across the country with their alumni associations. And to my mind, the worst thing that can happen is to be cut off and told, "Well, you guys are off the reservation. You're gone." Because we're in business, essentially. What it comes down to is we're here to help strengthen our alma mater. And you don't want to do anything, at least to my mind, that is going to jeopardize that relationship. As I see it, our job is always to harness the talents, the resources, the interest, and support of our alumni in making a better university, a stronger university. That, to me, is what an alumni association needs to be doing. Yeah.
I have a question about the Alumni Association and what you mentioned earlier about sort of the legislative advocacy group that you have. So it sounds like the times that you have used in the past have been for like funding. The university is not going to be getting enough money.
Right.
Are there any other times that it's appropriate or maybe necessary to ask for legislative advocacy? The only example that comes to mind is, let's say Pennsylvania proposes to bar non-discrimination against gender identity, which is a current bill. Penn State has adopted that. Is it in the Alumni Association's best interest to do this, knowing that the alumni are not going to fall on one side or the other of this? This is kind of a political question. So I guess the question is, when do you get the alumni politically involved? And It's not money.
Whenever we feel that it's in the best interest of the university, and the university asks us to support a certain position.
Okay.
And those kinds of things can happen. So yeah, not all threatening legislation is necessarily financial.
Sure.
So we work closely with the university to support its interests.
Okay.
Vis-a-vis the Pennsylvania legislature and the federal government too, and Congress. So yes, if that answers your question.
Did we? I can remember when Corbett was election day. And a young student came out and was being interviewed by the PBS station here. And he said, yes, he voted for Corbett because he was sure Corbett would be good for the university. And I looked at him like he had 3 heads and kept my mouth shut because I wasn't the interviewer and I was just listening. And of course, within a couple of weeks after Corbett was sworn in, he had cut everything. But my question actually has to do with several years later, when he comes up for re-election, he still has not moved back to reestablish funding for education in general or us in specific. What I cannot remember is, did the Alumni Association say or do anything, and I probably got whatever was said or sent out, about the fact that this administration has been extremely difficult for education in general and higher education in specific, and any form of support for Wolf, because I mean clearly 4 more years of Corbett was a disaster on top of a disaster.
Well, we have to be very careful. I mean, we can make the case in a positive fashion for a restoration of funding, but we can't be partisan for a lot of reasons. Governor Corbett happened to be a Republican, but it's the Republicans in the legislature who really worked to restore our funding. And we had a great ally in Jake Corman, among others, who worked very hard in the university's interest. So it's not a matter of Democrats versus Republicans, and we can't go down that road. We have to work with people on both sides of the aisle constantly. We don't necessarily want to antagonize anybody, and we don't want to be partisan. Now, part of this is found in our charter, in our status as a nonprofit 501c3. We can't issue, I think the language in that is political propaganda. We're barred from doing that, and the penalty would be a revocation of our nonprofit status. So, again, you have to walk a fine line.
So would that fine line include saying this administration, not this Republican administration, this administration has been difficult for education? Or can you say something, or do you simply have to say, this administration is promising this and the new administration is promising that, and leave it for everybody else to kind of pick up the pieces and make their decision? Can you say even that much?
It's hard to go even quite that far, but you can present information. Now, we communicate on a regular basis with our legislative advocates, if you will, through a monthly e-newsletter and through action alerts. So it's not just a matter of sitting back and waiting till a crisis occurs and saying, hey, help us. We're constantly feeding them information. And so what we would do is, in a bipartisan fashion, or a nonpartisan fashion, if there's a, in the governor's message, we make at least the higher education component of that available. We notify our folks, say, here it is. We did the same thing, I believe, with candidate Wolf's plan for higher education. So we let our folks draw their own. We present information.
You present it.
Yeah, and we basically will say, this is where our funds were cut. This is where we're trying to get to. And, this is what we're working toward. And it's happening. It's beginning to happen. Other questions? Concerns?
What do you, still on the alumni line, what do you say to people who don't, get the point of an alumni association?
It's a real interesting point.
Yeah, people who are I'm done with the school. I gave them all my money. Why should I continue to be a supporter.
Sure, well, and there are alumni out there who get angry and say, I'm done. And there are folks who say, I'll never give Penn State another penny.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, all you can do is make a positive case for the fact that this is an institution of higher learning. It's in the business of creating vibrant futures for men and women from all over, and we can't achieve that goal without your support. Mm-hmm. In America, alumni associations, unique in the world. Mm-hmm. We have a number of visitors coming over here and to this college that are interested in learning from nations around the world, interested in learning a lot about fundraising and about alumni relations. What's exceptional about America is that our higher education tradition is based on lay governance. You go to British universities historically, and these are universities of the faculty, by the faculty, for the faculty. Gee, it must be wonderful, But going back to Harvard, 1636, there's a tradition and a history of lay governance, which I think is a good thing because it ties the ivory tower to the larger world. And that's important. And alumni associations, another historical fact about America, if you read the history writings of David Hackett Fisher, for example, Albion's Seed, which is a brilliant book, he's looking for the cultural determinants of this kind of society. And a lot of it is based on volunteerism. We ask people to do things for free, to step up. We use volunteers in so many ways in this country, and that's sort of unique too. And there's a lot of interest in seeing that spread around the globe as well. But alumni relations is part and parcel of that. What was it? The first alumni association was, I think, at Williams College in 1821. And again, groups of alumni getting together to support the institution through a variety of ways. At Penn State, the Penn State Alumni Association came together in 1870. That's about 11 years after the first classes were held in 1859. Chartered formally in 1874, but really we trace our roots to 1870. And it's a small group of people, but they wanted to see this institution succeed. And so that's sort of unique to the American system of higher education. I don't know if that gets at your question or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of those unique elements about American higher education that make it work as it does. Sorry?
Does that also match changes, first American and then worldwide, bit by bit, where we are not that village community anymore? So that having an association with a group of people, perhaps the people you were young with, went to college with 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, becomes enormously appealing, again, on the psychological level. That this gives you a group. So I never went back home to northern New Jersey. I didn't even go to a high school reunion until the 5th. And much to everybody's surprise, mine included. But it seems to me that many of the people I know, and certainly in my undergraduate alumni association, which I'm, if not super active, at least a part, I'm there. That was a place that I went to that was extremely important in making me. And it gives me a grounding with women across the country and around the world who wound up going to college in the same place. And I think Penn State's Alumni Association works very much on that. We are a group. We did this as a group. We are an organization, and it gives us a membership thing that doesn't matter where you go in the world, you're part of it.
Right, and the world is constantly atomizing and subdividing. It gives you a sense of identity and belonging and camaraderie with others who've gone through the same experience. So it means a lot. Alumni associations, Big Ten around the world, they have a passionate group of alumni. who do a lot for the institution. And I think we have the biggest and the best and most ambitious, as we have said. And one thing I like about Penn State is our Alumni Association represents the entire university, and yet it has constituent parts. In every academic college, there's an alumni society that's part of the Penn State Alumni Association. So Phil here is the Alumni Relations Director for the College of Education. And he works with the College of Education Alumni Society, which is part of the Penn State Alumni Association. In fact, the president of every college alumni society sits on our governing board, our alumni council. So every academic college, whether it's a graduate school, the College of Education, the College of the Liberal Arts, they all have representation on the Penn State Alumni Association. And that's true of every campus as well. So we have 24 campus locations across the Commonwealth, but each of them also has an alumni society, and their president also sits on our governing board. So we overarch, we overspread the entire university, and yet we like to think that we attend to the interests of the entire university as well.
Do
Our campuses and colleges.
Who's stuff leading that, hurting that group of cats?
Well, we have our alumni council is our governing board. There are about 100 people on it. Right now, every college, every campus, there are 30 appointed members, 30 elected members. So it's a broad organization, and we have an executive board that also drives the Alumni Association and a volunteer president. The president right now is a gentleman named Kevin Steele. He's the district attorney of Montgomery County, Philadelphia. He's doing a number of things on the side, one of which is prosecuting Bill Cosby. He's our volunteer president and doing a fine job. The president before him was a woman named Kay Salvino, who was a professional medical practice administrator. She's retired. She moved up here with her husband about 10 years ago, and Kay did a tremendous job for the Alumni Association. So, it's a spirit. I like to think of all for one and one for all, and it works.
I have a question. So I'm in the law school now, and I know that Penn State Law just recently started operating as its own institution, separate from Dickinson Law.
Separate accreditation process.
Right, and so Dickinson has a much longer history in the state of Pennsylvania, much larger alumni base than Penn State Law as a formal institution.
Yes.
How do you drum up support for a school that didn't exist when your alumni were there?
How do you drum up support? Well, you basically incorporate an alumni society representing that Penn State Law, if you will. Bring them into the Alumni Association, and you start to build. They also have, I think, Penn State Law has a professional staff, like the person who does what Phil does for alumni, and you just you build it up over time.
Okay.
But it's often good to get in on the ground floor. Now, we've done the same thing with nursing at Penn State. There was a school of nursing. It is now the College of Nursing. I think it's split off entirely from the College of Health, not entirely, but it's split off administratively from the College of Health and Human Development, which is where it was lodged. And again, this year, they have their own alumni society. Their president, Wendy Edgar, is a member of the Alumni Council. So we're doing what we can to bring them in and support them as best we can.
The little campus as well.
That's one of the big success stories for the Alumni Association and for Penn State is World Campus, Penn State World Campus. I mean, it is.
You still quote the percentages?
Yeah, it's grown from scratch. It got started in the late 1990s with a major grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and it now has a head count of, I want to say, 16,000, 17,000 students. And we early on, the Alumni Association formed a partnership with Penn State World Campus because this is going to be the largest growth area of the university. It is now, after University Park, it's our second largest campus, if you look at it that way. The virtual campus, but it's our second largest campus. This is where the growth is, and so we want to be part of it. So we've been partnering with Penn State World Campus for, I want to say 10 years now, in a variety of ways. And what's interesting is that World Campus alumni join the Penn State Alumni Association at the highest rates across all the colleges and campuses. Now, why is that? I think it's because, you know, they want to belong. And they're in San Diego, they're in Venezuela, wherever they are. They want that connectivity. And so that, I think, induces them to want to be part of the Penn State Alumni Association. We do other things too to help nurture that. But it's been a tremendous partnership, I think.
And I think it's key, not to tout someone in my position, but having a professional within the college, especially a new college, and having someone there so that there's constant contact with the alumni. Because there's only so much that the staff at the Alumni Association can do. They only have so many staff people there. But like tonight we're recognizing outstanding alumni from the College of Education. And so 9 people are receiving awards tonight for various stages of their career. And it's recognizing your alumni, getting them involved, I think helps grow that sense of community and keeps them connected to the university. So not only do we do awards here in the college level, but then the university does awards. The Alumni Association has 2 awards for alumni, and then the Board of Trustees has 1. So there's a whole process of recognizing outstanding alumni and getting them involved and bringing them back to campus. And it really is a good thing.
And pumping them for funds.
And that's the development operation that does that.
Yeah.
But we work closely with them. And, our mantra is really to connect them to the university, to communicate with them, to strengthen their relationship with the university in hopes that they will support it. Well, we're quite often, and that includes money.
Actually, I was going to answer the question from the other side because I was thinking about it from the World Campus side where you're not here. You don't go running in and out of the hub, for example, and in and out of the Penn State stores downtown and stuff. But the Alumni Association also offers certain things, and I may have missed this at the beginning, but it seems to me that part of whatever it is that they're offering has got to be a good part of the whole, particularly for people who aren't here and don't have that visceral roommate remembrance thing. And I'm thinking, why am I getting the mail that says Penn State will give you this or that? Well, I can remember you've got some of the travel things, and you've got some of the insurance things where when you're part of a group that actually can make a difference for you. I imagine there are dozens and dozens of them. And I'm probably, like seeing and just passing by most of them, given that I A, live here and B, may not be young enough or have an interest in or be ready to do that particular travel this year. But it seems to me that there are a lot of things that the alumni associations have learned to offer to their students.
Yeah, we have a range, panoply of benefits from travel program, as Teresa has just described, to insurance programs at a discount, to any number of we have the alumni store, just a lot of benefits and services that we offer. But one of the most valued that has built up over the years is Alumni Career Services, which serves to connect alumni with the Alumni Association in terms of those people in career transition, those alumni looking for jobs or new positions. And that has grown. When I left, I think it was over 65,000 members in the LinkedIn site that attends to our Alumni Career Services. That's been a phenomenal success story. And another benefit that we try to drum in to students whom we call alumni in training is that when you get out, when you graduate, no matter where you go, you're going to find a constituent organization, a chapter of the Penn State Alumni Association in that city. So if you graduate and you would have a job in San Diego or Chicago or New York City, anywhere, Chicago, Minneapolis, there is a Penn State alumni chapter waiting for you, and they will embrace you with open arms. And it's a great way to start linking in and creating a professional and social network. So that's a huge benefit. Now we have about 150 chapters around the country and in countries around the world. So that's That's a huge advantage for young alumni who are going out into the world. So between that and alumni career services, those I think are two of the more attractive benefits. But our communications vehicles, our Penn State magazine is the most highly valued benefit of membership. Our surveys tell us that time and time again. We have an incredible editor, He, who's been at it for, I think about 20 years now, and she just does a tremendous job. She's one of the most respected college and university magazine editors in the country. We had a brilliant director of strategic communications, Amy Caputo, just a fine staff who do so much good for the Alumni Association. I could go on and on, but I see the hour is drawing late. Anything else, Sam, or what do you think?
I'm good. We're about 1:30, so I think folks have 1:30. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
It was a lot of fun.
Good.